Stay on this story and invite to the show Judge Shira Scheindlin. She's a former U.S. District Court judge for the Southern District of New York for 22 years. Judge, thank you so much for making time for us today.
My pleasure.
Judge Scheindlin, can you help us understand, and of course we're Canadians, it's a different legal system, help us understand how this U.S. Appeals Court came to this decision that essentially the presidential tariffs are unconstitutional?
Well, the lower court is called the Court of International Trade, and that's where the lawsuit was brought. And that court said that the tariffs that he imposed were unconstitutional and that he used a statute that doesn't apply. The International Economic Emergency Power Act, IEPA, is what we call it. And they said he didn't have the power to do what he did. Of course, he appealed immediately, and that went to the Federal Circuit Court, a special court that hears appeals from the Court of International Trade and also from the Court of the Patent Court. So they're a very specialized circuit. And they did a smart thing. They decided to sit what's called en banc, meaning all the judges of that circuit sat together, all 11, instead of a panel of 3. Because if they'd sat by 3, then there would have been an en banc appeal. So now we've skipped that stage. And the 11 judges of the Federal Circuit split 7-4 on last night's decision. 7 of the judges, again, agreed with the lower court and said his tariffs were unconstitutional. But 4 dissented and said they thought it was okay. And interestingly, he called it a partisan court, but the dissenting opinion was written by a judge appointed by President Obama. So as usual, I think President Trump is way off base in thinking that judges are political and they rule in accordance with the principles of the president who appointed them. That doesn't seem to be the case at all.
Now, the president does have some leeway, and in fact, nothing is really changing because the tariffs are going to stay in effect. He has until October 14th to take this to the Supreme Court. How do you think, well, how does the Supreme Court now navigate this?
Yeah, well, that's a very important question, and I don't think anybody honestly has the answer as to what the 9 justices of that court will do. I do agree that they will likely take this case because it's of very high importance to be clear as to who has the power. Under the Constitution, it's supposed to be the Congress that has the power. Under Article 1 of the Constitution, Section 8, it says the Congress has the power to lay taxes. And the time of the founding, the only taxes were tariffs. There was no income tax in those days. So tariffs was always in the hands of the legislative branch. This is yet another separation of powers issue that we're hearing over and over again with this president. He is doing things that Congress should be doing, like spending, like taxation. So we'll see. I think the Supreme Court will take it. But where they come down, we're not sure, because this Supreme Court has been very deferential to this theory called the unitary executive, which means that the president has the broadest of powers to do what he thinks is in the nation's interest. So it's hard to predict. It could be 5-4, it could be 6-3, and I don't even know in which direction.
Exactly. Okay, so while we're waiting on that, Judge, we understand that the deadline for him to submit his appeal is October 14th. What happens on October 15th?
Well, he's going to ask for a stay.
Okay.
Of course, he's going to say, the appellate court, the Federal Circuit, did stay its decision, until October 14th, and now you should continue that stay until you rule. So he will ask the court to allow these tariffs to stay in place until they rule. And that would be interesting because they often don't rule until June. Even if they hear a case in November or January, they often don't rule on the big cases until June. So if they grant a stay, I think these tariffs will be in place for quite a long time.
Judge Scheindlin, as you're watching all of this unfold in the United States, this administration, it's been so litigious. It's been sued so much, and it's threatened to sue so many different parties. I mean, what, in a larger context, what is this doing to the legislative system, to the executive branch of the government, and to the legal process in the United States? Right.
So there are 3 co-equal branches of government in the United States. the legislative, the judicial, and the executive. They're supposed to be co-equal, but that is not the way this president is acting. He thinks that the executive branch is far more powerful than the legislative branch or the judicial branch. And the legislative branch, our Congress, as you know, is controlled in both houses by Republicans. And they've gone along with this. They've let him take over the spending power and the taxing power, which is theirs. I can't quite understand why they're willing to give up their power and their role. But I think they're so intimidated by this president that they just do whatever he wants. So that's the legislative branch. Now, the judicial branch has fought back valiantly in the lower courts. The district courts, where I came from, have ruled against his position over and over again, particularly on immigration issues, but on most of the separation of powers issues, such as the firing of executives, heads of agencies, which, as you see, he just did again this week in firing the head of the CDC and trying to fire one of the governors of the Federal Reserve. So far, the judiciary has fought back, but not at the highest level. The district courts have fought back, the appellate courts, the circuit courts have fought back, but somehow when it gets to the Supreme Court, he has had a lot of victories, particularly in what we call the shadow docket, which means emergency appeals without full briefing. So it's been a pattern that they've supported his position. Not all the time, but I would give it an 80% of the time.
Okay, then let's go back then to the Supreme Court, and let's say Trump wins, his appeal moves through, and he can stick with the tariffs. Are there other legal apparatuses for people to challenge the tariffs that he has imposed on countries right around the world, and where we are feeling it heavy duty in Canada?
I would say no. Once the Supreme Court says that he had the power to impose the draconian tariffs that he has opposed under this statute, which does not seem to me to apply at all. But if they say he could use that statute to do it, there's no more attacks left to mount. But maybe they'll say, Mr. President, you can impose tariffs, but not under the authority of this act. There are other statutes that you can use. And I've always thought that's how this case was going to end. You can try again under a different statute. But one of the statutes that he could do would only allow him to impose the tariff for 150 days and only at 15%, which is nowhere near the 35% that he's imposed, I believe, on Canada. So maybe it's 25, it's either 25 or 35, but whatever it is, that statute limits it to 15%. So they may say you used the wrong statute, but you do have authority at least for a 150-day period.
And Judge, you're not alone in that confusion, because some of the tariffs are 10%, some are 25, some are 35, some are 50. So we're all trying to navigate this together.
Right.
Well, Judge Shira Scheindlin, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for your insights and for your clarity today.
My pleasure again. Thank you.
Take care.